I sit in a glass-walled conference room, surrounded by polished suits, catered pastries, and fake smiles. The air is thick with the scent of expensive coffee and self-congratulation. My boss, Monroe Keller, is halfway through his smug presentation, every slide displaying my work, my data, and my vision, like it was his all along. He gestures with a laser pointer, his voice a confident baritone that fills the room, a sound I've come to associate with theft and deceit. And everyone's eating it up. The men in tailored Italian suits nod along, their faces reflecting the glow of the projector screen, their minds already counting the profits. The women, sharp and ambitious, take meticulous notes, impressed by the seamless integration of market analysis and user-centric design, a design I bled for, a design I created during sleepless nights, fueled by cheap instant noodles and a burning sense of injustice. I watch them, a ghost in my own machine, my presence in the room a mere formality, a box to be ticked. I am the back-end developer he occasionally gestures to, a living prop in the theater of his success. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of rage and helplessness. I want to stand up, to scream that the words coming out of his mouth are mine, that the elegant code architecture he's glossing over was built by my hands, that the entire strategic framework was born from my mind. But my voice is trapped, a prisoner in my own throat. I'm just Jocelyn Maywright, the quiet girl who sits in the back, the one they see but don't really notice. I am a cog, and Monroe is the grand architect, at least in this room, in this moment. He clicks to the next slide, a detailed projection of user growth over the next 5 years. My projections. I remember creating that graph at 3 in the morning, my eyes burning, my apartment silent except for the hum of my laptop. I had felt a flicker of pride then, a sense of ownership. Now, watching Monroe claim it, that pride curdles into a bitter acid in my stomach. I clench my fists under the polished mahogany table, my nails digging into my palms, the small pain a grounding anchor in a sea of fury. Except one man. One man isn't nodding, he isn't taking notes. He's leaning forward, his elbows on the table, a crease of concentration between his brows. His name is Anton Dresden, a billionaire investor known for his almost predatory ability to spot promising startups and snap them up before they hit the mainstream. He's the big fish, the reason for the expensive pastries and the feigned camaraderie. His presence has electrified the room, but he seems immune to Monroe's practiced charm. He squints at the final slide, the one that summarizes the entire platform's value proposition. It's a clean, minimalist slide with a powerful tagline, my tagline. He tilts his head, his gaze sharp and analytical, cutting through the layers of corporate posturing. He looks from the screen to Monroe, and then his eyes scan the room, passing over the eager faces of the executive team. For a heart-stopping moment, his gaze lands on me. It's just a flicker, a brief, questioning glance, but it's enough to make the air in my lungs catch. He leans forward even more, his voice cutting through Monroe's self-satisfied drone. "Wait," he says, and the single word has the force of a gavel strike. The room falls silent. Monroe freezes mid-sentence, his mouth slightly agape, the laser pointer's red dot trembling on the screen. "Isn't this Jocelyn Maywright's platform? I invested in her beta 3 years ago." The silence that follows is no longer respectful. It is thick, heavy, and accusatory. Every head in the room swivels, every pair of eyes fixing on me. I am no longer a ghost. I am suddenly terrifyingly visible. I can feel the heat of their collective stare, a physical pressure. I see shock, confusion, and dawning suspicion on their faces. Monroe's face, which was so ruddy with confidence just moments before, has turned a pasty, sickly white. His eyes dart towards me, wide with a panic he can't conceal. In that moment, he looks small, a fraud exposed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the boardroom. That's when I speak. The voice that was trapped in my throat finds its way out, not as a scream but as a calm, clear statement that slices through the tension. I slowly push my chair back, the sound scraping softly against the floor, and I stand. I meet Anton Dresden's gaze first, a silent acknowledgement, a thank you. Then I turn my eyes to the rest of them, to the people who watched me be diminished day after day. Finally, I look at Monroe, at the man who tried to erase me. Yes, I say, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I'm Jocelyn Maywright, and he stole it. This is the story of how I went from being humiliated, underpaid, and silenced, to secretly building an empire and exposing the boss who tried to erase me. It started on my 28th birthday, March 14th. The day began with a sliver of optimism, a foolish hope that things might be different. I'd woken up before dawn, the sky outside my small apartment window still a deep, bruised purple. I carefully arranged a dozen cupcakes I'd baked the night before into a pink box. They were vanilla bean with a lemon curd filling, my favorite. It felt silly, bringing my own birthday treats to the office, but I yearned for a small moment of connection, a brief acknowledgement that I existed beyond the lines of code I produced. I pictured a few coworkers gathering around my desk, a chorus of happy birthday, a shared moment of simple warmth before the day's pressures began. It was a small, fragile hope, but it was enough to put a hesitant smile on my face as I walked into the office building. I arrived early, the office still quiet, the air smelling of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. I walked towards the kitchen, intending to leave the cupcakes there, but stopped short. Through the large glass wall of the main conference room, I saw them, my entire team. They were gathered around the long table, laughing, sipping from champagne flutes filled with orange juice. There was a catered spread of pastries, fruit platters, and a large, professionally decorated cake. Streamers hung from the ceiling. It was a birthday brunch, a cheerful, elaborate birthday brunch for Monroe's niece, a perky 20-something, who was interning for the summer and didn't even officially work in our department. They didn't invite me. The pink cupcake box in my hands suddenly felt incredibly heavy, incredibly pathetic. I stood frozen by the humming photocopier, a silent observer to a celebration I was not part of. I watched Sarah from marketing toss her head back, laughing at something Monroe said. I saw Mark, the lead graphic designer, raise his glass in a toast. They were my team, the people I spent 40, sometimes 60 hours a week with. But in that moment, I had never felt more alone. A cold wave of humiliation washed over me. So intense it was almost dizzying. I felt my face flush with a hot, shameful blush. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I quickly ducked back behind the wall, my heart pounding a sick, hollow rhythm, pretending I hadn't seen, pretending I wasn't melting inside from the sheer casual cruelty of it all. I walked to my desk, slid the box of cupcakes under it, and stared at my blank computer screen, the reflection showing a stranger with haunted eyes. Later that day, the second blow landed. An email notification popped up on my screen. It was a calendar invite from Monroe. My breath caught in my throat when I read the subject line, "Final pitch meeting with Vestra Holdings." Vestra Holdings was the whale, the mega client we'd been chasing for nearly a year, and the project being pitched was mine. It was codenamed Project Nightingale, an internal communications platform I had conceived, designed, and built from the ground up over the last 6 grueling months. It was my baby, my masterpiece. But as my eyes scanned the details of the invite, a cold dread seeped into my bones. The presenter was listed clearly, in bold type, Monroe Keller. My name was nowhere to be seen, not as a co-presenter, not even as a technical consultant. I wasn't on the invite list at all. He had accidentally sent it to me, a sloppy, arrogant mistake. He hadn't even bothered to hide his theft, he had just assumed I wouldn't see it, or if I did, that I wouldn't have the courage to say anything. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the words blurring. The humiliation from the morning, compounded by this blatant professional theft, created a pressure inside my chest that felt unbearable. This time, I didn't hide. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor, and walked directly to his office. He was on the phone, leaning back in his ostentatious leather chair, laughing. He saw me, held up a finger, and finished his call with a booming, "Talk soon, buddy." "Monroe," I began, my voice trembling slightly. I held my phone up, showing him the invite. "Project Nightingale. The Vestra pitch. It says you're the presenter." He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed, he just laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, not exactly. It was worse. It was dismissive, patronizing, as if I were a child who didn't understand how the world worked. Relax, Jocelyn, he said, waving a hand breezily. It's just a formality. You're good at the back-end stuff, the nuts and bolts. I'm the face. I'm the one who can sell it. This is how we win the big accounts. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list the hundreds of hours I'd poured into it, the weekends I'd sacrificed, the innovative solutions I'd devised that made the platform unique. I wanted to tell him that being the face of someone else's work was just a pretty term for being a thief, but the words wouldn't come. The power imbalance was too vast, the casualness of his dismissal too crushing. My silence was his victory. He saw the fight drain from my eyes and gave me a satisfied little nod, as if the matter was settled. Instead of screaming, I just nodded, a single jerky nod of defeat. I turned and walked away from his office, my body feeling strangely light, disconnected. I walked past the desks of my coworkers, past the conference room where the sad, deflated streamers still hung, and I didn't stop until I reached the women's bathroom. I pushed my way into a stall, locked the door, and slid down to the cold, tiled floor. The carefully constructed dam of my composure finally broke. I buried my face in my hands and cried. Not quiet, delicate tears, but deep, racking sobs that tore through my body, fueled by months of quiet slights and a birthday that had become a monument to my own insignificance. That was the moment I made the vow. As I sat there on the floor, surrounded by the sterile scent of bleach, I swore to myself a silent, ferocious promise. I would never, ever let someone like Monroe Keller take from me again. Every day after that birthday, the office became a different kind of battlefield. The fluorescent lights that once seemed merely unflattering now felt like interrogation lamps. The low hum of the servers became a constant reminder of the digital world I had built, a world Monroe was preparing to claim as his own. But something inside me had shifted. The despair that had crippled me on the bathroom floor began to harden, crystallizing into a cold, sharp resolve. I would no longer be a victim. I would be a strategist. My workday didn't end at 5 o'clock anymore. It was just the beginning of my real work. After the last of my coworkers had packed up, their cheerful goodbyes echoing in the cavernous space, I would remain at my desk. The cleaning crew grew accustomed to the sight of me, a solitary figure hunched over my keyboard, bathed in the glow of my dual monitors. I stayed late, not for the job, but for myself. My first act of rebellion was quiet, meticulous, and invisible. I began backing up my work. Every line of code I had ever written for Project Nightingale, every wireframe that detailed its user interface, every client proposal that outlined its strategic value. I copied it all onto a series of encrypted external hard drives, small, discrete rectangles of plastic and metal that held the sum of my creative life. I felt a grim satisfaction with each completed transfer, the progress bar a small green line of defiance. I wasn't just archiving my work, I was reclaiming it, digitally liberating it from the company servers where Monroe believed it belonged to him. With my original work secured, I began a new secret project. In the quiet solitude of the empty office, I started building a clone of Project Nightingale. But this wasn't just a copy. It was an evolution. I rewrote sections of the code to be more efficient. I streamlined the database queries to be faster. I redesigned the user flow to be more intuitive. This new version, my version, was cleaner, smarter, and free of the corporate compromises and bloated features Monroe had insisted on. It was the platform as it was always meant to be. My life outside the office shrank until it was almost non-existent. My apartment became a second office, a command center for my secret operation. At night, after leaving the real office, I would prop my personal laptop on my small kitchen table and dive into a world of self-education. I devoured free MIT OpenCourseWare lectures on SaaS infrastructure and scalable cloud architecture. My browser tabs were a chaotic mix of coding forums, legal websites, and business tutorials. On weekends, while my friends were going to brunch, or on weekend trips, I was poring over articles about digital licensing, intellectual property law, and the bureaucratic maze of startup incorporation. I learned about provisional patents, trademarks, and the critical importance of establishing a clear paper trail of ownership. The life I'd known before, casual dinners, movies, idle chatter, faded into a distant memory. I started skipping parties, replying to invitations with vague, apologetic texts. I needed every spare dollar for my new venture, so I began to sell off parts of my old life. The comfortable armchair I loved to read in, sold on Facebook Marketplace for $75. The collection of vinyl records I'd inherited from my father, gone. The final painful sacrifice was my mother's bracelet, a delicate gold chain with a single pearl. She had given it to me for my college graduation. Pawning it felt like a betrayal, a severing of a precious link to my past. I stood in the sterile, depressing pawn shop, the cash cool in my hand, and fought back tears. But that money wasn't just money. It was a lifeline. It paid for a year's subscription to a secure cloud server, a digital home for my new platform, a place that Monroe could never touch. Meanwhile, back in the bright public world of the office, the daily humiliations continued. Monroe paraded me around as his pet developer. In meetings with other departments, he'd say things like, "Jocelyn here handles all the technical wizardry. She's just a developer, but she's a good one." He said it as if it were a compliment, but we both knew it was a carefully worded insult, a way to keep me in my box. It was a public declaration that my role was to execute, not to envision. When I dared to suggest design changes or strategic pivots during team meetings, my coworkers would often exchange amused glances. Once, Mark, the lead designer, had smirked and said, "You're not paid to think big, Jose. Just make sure the buttons work." The casual laughter that followed was like 1,000 tiny paper cuts, but I didn't let my anger show. I learned to wear a mask of placid compliance. I would smile, a quiet Mona Lisa smile that gave nothing away. I would nod, absorb the condescension, and retreat back to my desk. They saw a quiet, beaten-down coder. They had no idea they were fueling a revolution. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile, was another piece of kindling for the fire growing inside me. I was learning. I was planning. This is what rock bottom actually feels like. It's not a sudden dramatic crash. It's a slow, grinding erosion of your spirit. A quiet place where you are forced to decide whether to fade into nothingness or to start building, brick by painful brick, a new foundation from the dust. The nights grew longer, blurring into a monotonous cycle of work, study, and code. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my cubicle and the glowing rectangle of my screen. Loneliness was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I wore day and night. It was during one of these late nights, somewhere around midnight, that a crack of light appeared in my solitary existence. I was so engrossed in debugging a particularly nasty piece of code that I didn't hear him approach. It was Mr. Rollins, the night janitor, a man I'd only ever exchanged brief, polite nods with. He was a tall, thin man in his late 60s, with kind, weary eyes and hands that were gnarled from a lifetime of hard work. He moved through the empty office with a quiet dignity, his presence a comforting, rhythmic backdrop to my clandestine work. "You're always here, child," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. He wasn't accusatory, just observant. I jumped, startled, quickly minimizing the screen displaying my secret project. He chuckled softly. "Don't mind me, just an old man making his rounds." He leaned his broom against a nearby cubicle wall. "My daughter, she used to be like you, always working, always studying, smart as a whip." His eyes took on a distant, sad look, so focused on proving herself to people who didn't deserve it. "She died of cancer before anyone knew how brilliant she really was." They praised her at her funeral, of course, called her a rising star. Too little, too late. The story hung in the silent air between us, a poignant, painful confession. It was more than he'd ever said to anyone else in the office. I was sure of it. In that moment, he wasn't just the janitor, he was a fellow traveler, someone who understood the quiet ache of being overlooked. A bond formed between us in that shared silence, an unspoken alliance of the invisible. After that night, Mr. Rollins became my silent guardian. He started bringing me small offerings: a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a thermos of hot, strong coffee that tasted infinitely better than the burnt sludge from the office machine. He'd leave them on the edge of my desk without a word, a quiet act of kindness that felt like a lifeline. He never pried or asked what I was working on so late. He just seemed to understand. One night he paused by my desk longer than usual. He had seen my screen before I had a chance to hide it. It was filled with the wireframes for my new platform's user interface. He looked at the complex diagrams, the notes scrawled in the margins, the elegant flow of information. A slow smile spread across his face. "You building something?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. It was the first time I had acknowledged my project to another human being. The admission felt momentous, a release of a pressure I hadn't even realized I was holding. He didn't ask what it was for, or why I was doing it in secret. He just nodded, a look of profound understanding on his face. He picked up his broom and started to walk away, then paused and looked back at me over his shoulder. "Just make sure your name's on it this time," he said, his voice firm. "Make sure they can't take it from you." His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. He saw it all. He understood everything. A few days later, Mr. Rollins approached me with a proposition. "My nephew," he said, wiping down a nearby window with a practiced circular motion. "He's a good boy, smart, does computer stuff, websites and things. He's a freelancer, always looking for work. Maybe he could help you." He scribbled a name and number on a napkin from his lunch bag. Xander. I was hesitant at first, wary of letting anyone else into my secret world. But I trusted Mr. Rollins. I called the number. Xander was a revelation. He was a UI freelancer, a user interface design specialist, who was cheap, fast, and utterly brilliant. We met at a noisy coffee shop downtown. He had a nervous energy, constantly sketching ideas on a notepad. But when he talked about design, his eyes lit up. I showed him my rudimentary wireframes on my laptop. He didn't laugh or criticize. He saw the potential. He understood the vision. "The bones are good," he said, his pen already flying across his notepad. "The structure is solid. It just needs skin. It needs to breathe." Together, we spent hours sketching out the platform I had only ever seen in my head. He took my functional, clunky designs and transformed them into something beautiful, intuitive, and elegant. He listened to my ideas, respected my vision, and added his own creative genius to the mix. For the first time in months, sitting there with Xander amidst the clatter of coffee cups and the scent of roasted beans, I didn't feel alone. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt hope. The platform was christened Brightnest. It was a name that came to me in the middle of the night, a symbol of a secure, intelligent space for teams to communicate and build. The name felt right. It was hopeful, strong, and entirely mine. With Xander's polished user interface designs integrated into my robust back-end code, Brightnest was no longer just a dream or a secret act of defiance. It was a real, tangible product. It was bare bones, certainly, lacking the bells and whistles of more established competitors. But it was clean, efficient, and it worked flawlessly. The time for hiding was over. It was time to see if my creation could survive in the real world. With a trembling hand, I soft-launched the platform. There was no fanfare, no press release, no launch party, just a simple, elegant landing page that Xander had designed, and a subscription form powered by a third-party payment processor. My marketing strategy was as bare bones as the platform itself. I compiled a list of 200 small businesses, companies I thought could benefit from a streamlined internal communication tool. I found them through local business directories, industry forums, and LinkedIn searches. Then, one long, nerve-wracking night, I wrote a carefully crafted cold email, personalizing each one with the company's name and a specific reason why I thought Brightnest could help them. I hit send on the final email and leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and anticipation. The silence that followed was deafening. For 2 days, my inbox remained stubbornly empty. The initial trickle of hope began to evaporate. replaced by a familiar, sinking feeling of doubt. Had this all been a mistake? A foolish, expensive fantasy? Was Monroe right? Was I just a back-end developer, incapable of building something of my own? I tried to work at my day job, but my mind was elsewhere, constantly refreshing my personal email, hoping for a sign. Then, on the third day, it happened. A reply. My hands shook as I clicked it open. It was from a small architectural firm, a team of 12 people. The owner wrote, "This looks interesting. Can we schedule a demo?" A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me cry washed over me. I immediately replied, my fingers flying across the keyboard. That week, I received 2 more replies. One was a polite no thank you. The other was from a local nonprofit. After a brief email exchange and a live demo conducted from my tiny apartment living room, the architectural firm signed up. $500 a month. It wasn't a fortune, it wouldn't allow me to quit my day job or move into a bigger apartment. But it was everything. That $500 was more than just money. It was validation. It was proof that something I had built from scratch had value in the world. It was enough to pay for my server costs and my subscription to the design software Xander used. It was the first drop of rain after a long drought. By the end of the 3rd month, my quiet hustle had borne more fruit, through word of mouth from my first satisfied client and my continued relentless cold emailing. I had secured 4 more clients. Brightnest was now generating $2,500 a month. Every single penny was reinvested back into the platform, upgrading the servers, paying Xander for more design work, investing in better security protocols. I was building a self-sustaining ecosystem, a quiet, growing rebellion funded by its own success. But with this small taste of success came a new, terrifying level of risk. The juggling act of maintaining my secret identity was becoming more precarious. The biggest scare came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was taking a late lunch at my desk, using the time to quickly tweak a new UI element Xander had sent over. I was so engrossed that I didn't hear Monroe walk up behind me. "Still playing startup on weekends, huh?" he said, his voice laced with that familiar, condescending amusement. My blood ran cold. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart leaping into my throat. Had he seen it? Had he recognized the design, the layout? I forced a casual laugh, my face burning. "Oh, I stammered. Just a little side project to keep my skills sharp." He smirked, that arrogant, self-satisfied smirk that I hated more than anything. "Good for you, Jose. Keep at it. It's good to have hobbies." He patted me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be encouraging but felt like a brand, and then walked away whistling. He didn't know. He had seen a screen, but he hadn't understood what he was looking at. To him, it was just a hobby, a pathetic little dream I was tinkering with in my spare time. He had no idea he was looking at his own professional demise. He had no idea that my hobby was already generating revenue. He had no idea that I was no longer just the quiet coder in the corner. I was a founder, and I was getting stronger every single day. The pressure at the office was intensifying. Vestra Holdings, the massive potential client, was getting more serious. Their due diligence team was sniffing around our agency, asking pointed questions about our technical capabilities. Monroe, smelling the multi-million-dollar contract, was growing more audacious in his attempts to leverage my work. He wanted to borrow key components of my back-end architecture from Project Nightingale to showcase in their technical demos. He saw it as a simple solution, a way to impress Vestra with capabilities our agency didn't truly possess on its own. "It's no big deal, Jocelyn," he said, leaning against my cubicle wall, his tone casual, as if he were asking to borrow a pen. "We'll just integrate some of your back-end modules into the main presentation build. It's all for the same team, right?" When I hesitated, a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Come on, it's not like your code is patented or anything. It's company property." His words, meant to be a statement of fact, were a direct challenge. He was right, technically. The work I did for the agency, on their time and their equipment, was their intellectual property. But Project Nightingale was more than that. It was a living, breathing entity I had poured my soul into. And more importantly, its superior clone, brightness, was my own. The thought of him taking the very heart of my work, the elegant, efficient code that made it special, and using it to further his own career without giving me an ounce of credit, was nauseating. I had two obvious options, both of them terrible. I could say no, refuse to cooperate, and almost certainly get fired for insubordination just weeks before the biggest pitch of the year. Or, I could say yes, help him deceive the client, and then perhaps try to sue for credit later. A messy, expensive, and uncertain path. I would be a whistleblower, a malcontent, fighting a lonely battle against a well-funded corporation. I rejected both paths. In the quiet solitude of my apartment that night, staring at the lines of code on my screen, I saw a third option, a more dangerous, more strategic, and far more satisfying one. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was playing chess. My first move was to protect my queen. I spent an entire weekend researching and filling out the paperwork for a provisional patent application. With Xander's help, we documented every unique aspect of Brightness's architecture, from the user flow to the specific algorithms I had developed for data optimization. Filing it gave me a 1-year, legally recognized stake in the ground. My name, Jocelyn Maywright, was now officially attached to the core concepts of the technology. It was a shield, invisible to Monroe, but legally potent. My second move was to fortify my own kingdom. I went through the entire codebase of Brightness and encrypted the most critical and innovative sections. It was a digital lock that only I had the key to. This ensured that the version of the platform that was truly mine was secure and untouchable. My third and final move was the most audacious. It was the move that transformed me from a defender to an attacker. Monroe wanted to borrow my code for his demo to Vestra. Fine, I would give him what he wanted, but he wouldn't be getting the pristine, powerful engine from Project Nightingale. Instead, I spent 2 long nights carefully creating a new version of the backend files. On the surface, they looked identical. They would function perfectly under normal, low-stress conditions. But I embedded a series of subtle, insidious bugs, logic bombs, as they're known in the coding world. These bugs were designed to remain dormant, completely undetectable during standard testing. They would only trigger under specific high-pressure conditions, when the system was queried by multiple users simultaneously, when large datasets were being processed, or when certain administrative functions were accessed in a specific sequence. Conditions, in other words, that were almost guaranteed to occur during a high-stakes client demo with a dozen executives trying to poke holes in the system. When triggered, the bugs wouldn't cause a catastrophic crash. That would be too obvious. Instead, they would cause the system to slow to a crawl, for data to populate incorrectly, for key features to become inexplicably unresponsive. It would be a death by 1,000 cuts, making the platform appear unstable, unreliable, and amateurish. I saved this corrupted code onto a flash drive. The next day at the office, with a feigned air of reluctant cooperation, I walked to Monroe's desk. "Here are the back-end files you wanted for the Vestra demo," I said, my voice flat. I helped him integrate them into his presentation build, my heart hammering in my chest. He clapped me on the back, a smug look of victory on his face. "See? Team player. I knew you'd come around, Joshe." He had no idea that the files I had just given him were not a bridge to his success, but a Trojan horse, waiting silently to bring his entire charade crashing down around him. I walked back to my desk, a cold, thrilling sense of power coursing through my veins. The game had changed. I wasn't just building my own future anymore. I was rigging the game to ensure his would fail. The weight of my double life was becoming immense, a physical pressure that settled deep in my bones. I was a tightly wound spring, stretched to the absolute limit. I was working my full-time job at the agency, playing the part of the compliant developer. Then I was spending my nights and weekends building Brightness, managing my small but growing list of clients, and plotting Monroe's downfall. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, often reduced to 3 or 4 fitful hours. My diet consisted of coffee, energy bars, and whatever I could grab from a vending machine. The constant stress was a low-grade hum beneath the surface of everything. a persistent anxiety that coiled in my stomach. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night. I had been awake for nearly 48 hours straight, trying to resolve a critical server issue for one of my brightest clients, while simultaneously finishing a deadline-driven task for Monroe. I finally logged off around 2 a.m., my vision blurry, a dull headache pounding behind my eyes. I stood up from my kitchen table, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room tilted violently, the edges of my vision turning dark. I remember reaching a hand out to steady myself on the counter, but my coordination was gone. The next thing I knew, I was waking up to a sharp, throbbing pain in the side of my head. I was on my kitchen floor, the cold tiles a shock against my cheek. Sunlight was streaming through the window. It was morning. I had been unconscious for hours. Panic seized me. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy and weak. My head spun. That was when I heard the sound of a key in my apartment door. My blood ran cold. Who could possibly be letting themselves into my apartment? The door opened, and Mr. Rollins poked his head in, his face etched with worry. "Jocelyn? Child? Are you in there? You didn't come to work. I called your phone, no answer. I got worried." He saw me then, a crumpled heap on the floor, and rushed to my side. He had gotten a spare key from my building's superintendent, telling them it was an emergency. He had saved me. He helped me to the couch, his gentle strength a stark contrast to my own profound weakness. He insisted on calling an ambulance, and I was too weak to argue. The diagnosis at the hospital was as grim as it was predictable: severe dehydration, exhaustion, and acute stress-related fatigue. They put me on an IV drip, and as the cool fluid seeped into my veins, the full weight of my burnout crashed down on me. I had pushed my body and my mind to the absolute edge, and they had finally given out. I was forced to stay in the hospital for 2 days of observation and recovery. For the first time in months, I was completely disconnected. No laptop, no phone, no code. There was nothing to do but lie there and stare at the ceiling, feeling like a colossal failure. My carefully constructed world, I thought, was about to come crashing down. But something incredible happened. My tiny business, my fragile startup, survived without me. The moment I was able to, I called Xander, my voice weak and shaky, and explained what had happened. Without a moment's hesitation, he took over. He became the public face of Brightnest, handling all client communications, reassuring them that a minor technical issue was being resolved. He managed the crisis with a calm competence that amazed me. He was more than just a freelancer. He was a true partner. When I finally returned to my apartment, weak but on the mend, there was a small stack of mail waiting for me. Tucked among the bills and junk mail was a handwritten card. It was from the architectural firm, my very first client. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, the note read, "Jocelyn, we heard you were unwell. We just wanted to say we hope you feel better soon. We noticed you were gone. You matter to us." I sank onto my couch, clutching the card to my chest, and I cried harder than I had cried on my birthday. These weren't tears of humiliation or despair. They were tears of overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief and gratitude. In my relentless pursuit of success and revenge, I had forgotten the human element. I had built something that wasn't just about code and servers. I had built a service that people relied on, a community, however small. They had noticed my absence. I mattered. That simple, profound realization was a turning point. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't just a ghost in the machine. I was a founder, and I was just early. My breakdown wasn't the end. It was the brutal, necessary reset I needed to prepare for the real fight ahead. My 2 weeks of forced recovery were a crucible. Lying in my quiet apartment, I was forced to confront the unsustainability of my rage-fueled hustle. The breakdown had been a warning shot. I couldn't build an empire if I destroyed myself in the process. I had to work smarter, not just harder. That period of reflection changed everything. I started automating. I wrote scripts to handle routine server maintenance. I created a robust FAQ and knowledge base for Brightness clients, empowering them to solve minor issues on their own. I set up a ticketing system for support requests, allowing me to prioritize and manage them efficiently instead of letting them overwhelm my inbox. I was building a machine that could run, at least for a while, without my constant hands-on intervention. This newfound efficiency, born from necessity, allowed brightness to flourish in a way I hadn't thought possible. Over the next 8 months, the growth was exponential. It was a quiet rise, happening in the shadows, while I continued to play my role as an unremarkable developer at my day job. The 5 clients became 10, then 20. The word-of-mouth effect was more powerful than any advertising campaign I could have afforded. My clients, mostly small to medium-sized businesses, loved the platform's simplicity and effectiveness. They loved the personal touch of the customer service, which, even when automated, was built around a core of genuine care. They started recommending brightness to their peers, to other business owners in their networks. Before I knew it, I had a steady stream of organic, inbound leads. From 5 clients, we grew to 72. The monthly recurring revenue was no longer just paying for server costs, it was a substantial, growing stream of income. I reinvested every single dollar back into the business. I hired Xander on a more permanent, lucrative freelance contract, giving him the creative freedom to continually refine and improve the user experience. We added new features, but we were ruthless in our efficiency, avoiding the bloat that plagued so many SaaS platforms. We focused on doing one thing: internal communication optimization, and doing it better than anyone else. I had no ad spend, no marketing team, no fancy office. My entire operation was just me, my laptop, Xander's remote brilliance, and a suite of carefully chosen automation tools. It was a lean, powerful, and completely invisible success story. Then came the call that changed the trajectory of the game. It was from a junior analyst at Dresden Ventures, the venture capital firm owned by the legendary Anton Dresden. My heart leaped into my throat. How had they found me? It turned out one of their portfolio companies had become a Brightness client through a referral and had been raving about the platform to their investors. The analyst said Mr. Dresden's firm was interested in a potential seed investment. A year ago, this call would have been the ultimate validation, the dream come true moment. But I wasn't the same person I was a year ago. I had learned to play chess. An investment would mean giving up equity, giving up a degree of control. It would mean bringing in outsiders who might not understand my vision or my methods. I didn't want their money. I wanted something far more valuable. I wanted leverage. I politely declined the offer of an investment meeting. The analyst was shocked into a rare silence. Startups didn't say no to Dresden Ventures. "Thank you for the interest," I said, my voice calm and steady, belying the frantic pounding of my heart. "But Brightness is not seeking funding at this time. We are profitable and are growing organically at a pace I'm comfortable with." Then I made my counteroffer. "However," I continued, "I understand that Mr. Dresden's firm holds a diverse portfolio of companies. If any of them ever have a need for a niche, high-performance internal communications tool, I would be open to discussing a potential exclusivity arrangement. We could even white-label our platform for their use, providing a seamless branded solution for your companies." It was a bold, audacious move. I was turning down their money and instead offering them a service, positioning Brightness not as a desperate startup begging for cash, but as a strategic asset, a secret weapon they could offer to their own investments. I was speaking their language: value, efficiency, and competitive advantage. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the analyst typing furiously. 2 days later, I received a direct email from Anton Dresden himself. It was brief and to the point. He was intrigued by my proposal. He agreed to the terms. A contract was drawn up and signed electronically. Just like that, I had a strategic partnership with one of the most powerful investors in the tech world. He was on my side, even if he didn't fully know it yet. And that's how I got on his radar. The final piece of the puzzle had just clicked into place. My Trojan horse was inside the city walls, and now I had a powerful ally waiting for my signal. The air in the office crackled with a nervous energy. Monroe strode through the aisles like a conquering hero, a perpetual smirk plastered on his face. He called an all-hands meeting, gathering everyone in the main conference room, the same room where I had been invisibly erased on my birthday. Team, he announced, his voice booming with false magnanimity, we have a massive opportunity in front of us. He paused for dramatic effect, scanning the faces of the eager-to-please staff. Vestra Holdings has invited us to present a final pitch. This is the big one, people. The one that puts us on the map. He then announced that he had selected the project to be presented. My project, Project Nightingale. A murmur of excitement went through the room. I stood in the back, my expression carefully neutral, my hands clasped behind my back to keep them from shaking. He was walking right into the trap. It was almost poetic. The very tool of his theft was now the bait. After the meeting, he caught me by the coffee machine. He had that familiar, patronizing look in his eyes, the one that made my skin crawl. Jocelyn, he said, leaning in conspiratorially, I want you to be there for the pitch. It's important for team morale. He paused, then added the inevitable caveat. You can attend. Just sit in the back, take notes, provide technical support if needed. The arrogance was breathtaking. He was inviting me to watch him steal my work, to be a silent accomplice in my own erasure, and framing it as a favor. The old me would have withered under that condescending gaze. The old me would have nodded and swallowed the bitter pill of my anger. But I was not the old me. I smiled. A genuine calm smile that seemed to momentarily confuse him. Of course, Monroe, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I'd be happy to be there to support the team. Just send me the details. He beamed, pleased with my easy compliance. That's the spirit, Jose. Team player. The week leading up to the meeting was a blur of quiet preparation. I received the official non-disclosure agreement from Vestra's legal team. As I signed the document, a thrill went through me. I was now a formal, documented participant in this charade. I was no longer just an employee. I was a signatory, a legal entity in the room. I sat quietly in the team prep meetings, listening as Monroe rehearsed his lines, stumbling over technical details that he didn't truly understand. He would occasionally glance over at me. Is that right, Jose? He'd ask, and I would nod and provide the correct information, feeding him the rope he would use to hang himself. My own allies were ready. I had a brief, coded conversation with Mr. Rollins in the hallway. The big meeting is Friday, I said. He simply nodded, a glint in his eye. I'll be thinking of you, child. Make them see. Xander and I had a final call the night before. He had already prepared a dossier on Brightnest LLC, including our incorporation documents, our client list, and a copy of the contract I had signed with Dresden Ventures. It was all loaded onto a secure cloud drive, ready to be deployed. We were counting the minutes. The setup was complete. All the pieces were in their starting positions on the chessboard. All that was left was for the king to make his fatal, arrogant move. I laid out my clothes for the next day, a simple, professional dark blue dress. I didn't want to be flashy. I wanted to be underestimated one last time. I wanted them to see me as just a developer sitting in the back of the room, right up until the moment the world changed. And now we are back. Back in the glass-walled boardroom, the air thick with tension, and the smell of expensive coffee. I am sitting in the back, just as Monroe instructed, a silent observer in a dark blue dress. The catered pastries sit untouched on a side table, a monument to a celebration that is about to be violently derailed. Monroe is in his element, pacing in front of the projector screen, his voice confident, his gestures expansive. He's on the final slides, the crescendo of his performance, summarizing the platform's architecture and its projected market value. My architecture, my projections. He is selling my soul, and he doesn't even know it. But Anton Dresden, the man who matters, the billionaire investor whose opinion is the only one with any real weight in this room, is not buying it. He leans forward, his gaze sharp, and he frowns. It's a small expression, a subtle tightening of the muscles around his eyes, but in the hyper-aware silence of the room, it feels like a thunderclap. He looks at the elegant, minimalist slide on the screen, the one with the powerful tagline I wrote at my kitchen table at 3 a.m. Isn't this Jocelyn Maywright's product? He asks, his voice cutting through Monroe's polished narrative like a shard of glass. Silence, a profound, echoing silence that sucks all the air out of the room. Monroe freezes, his mouth hanging open, the smug confidence draining from his face like water from a sieve. Every head, every single one, swivels in my direction. The weight of their collective gaze is a physical force. I am the center of the universe. In that moment, I am no longer invisible. I push my chair back, the soft scrape on the floor is the only sound. I stand up, my posture straight, my hands steady at my sides. I feel a strange cold calm settle over me. I meet Anton Dresden's questioning gaze. Yes, I say, my voice clear and unwavering, carrying to every corner of the room. It is. Monroe finds his voice, but it's a reedy, panicked stutter. She works for me. She's a developer on my team. This is our agency's work. He gestures wildly at me, then at the screen, a puppet whose strings have just been cut. Anton Dresden doesn't even look at him. He waves a dismissive hand in Monroe's direction, a gesture of such profound contempt that it makes Monroe flinch as if he's been struck. No, Anton says, his voice flat and final. She doesn't. She owns Brightnest LLC. I've got the contract right here on my tablet. He taps the screen of the device in front of him, the quiet click punctuating the end of Monroe's career. A collective gasp ripples through the room. Jaws literally drop. One of the junior executives, his face a mask of disbelief, spills his coffee. The dark liquid spreads across the polished mahogany table like a stain, a perfect metaphor for the mess Monroe has just created. Anton Dresden finally turns his full attention to me, his expression a mixture of shrewd appraisal and wry amusement. "You didn't tell me you still worked here, Ms. Maywright," he says, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. I allow myself a small, controlled shrug. The ghost of a smile touches my own lips. The game is over. Checkmate. I needed the health insurance, I reply, but I'm ready now. The immediate aftermath was pure chaos, but a quiet, contained kind of chaos, like watching a building implode in slow motion. Monroe, his face a ghastly shade of pale, tried to spin the narrative. His voice, once so full of booming confidence, was now thin and desperate. This is a misunderstanding. She must have leaked proprietary information to Mr. Dresden. It's a setup. She's been working against us. He was flailing, throwing out wild accusations, trying to paint me as the villain, the corporate spy. Anton Dresden didn't even raise his voice. He simply looked at Monroe with an expression of utter disdain, the kind one might reserve for a particularly unpleasant insect. "Mr. Keller," he said, his voice cold and precise, "the platform I have a contract for, Brightnest, is demonstrably superior to the buggy, unstable version you just tried to present to me. My technical team vetted it weeks ago. The only person who seems to have leaked anything is you, leaking a shoddy copy of Miss Maywright's original work." He closed his tablet with a soft, final snap. "We don't work with liars, and we certainly don't work with thieves." He stood up, nodded curtly to me, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. His team followed him in a silent procession, leaving a vacuum of stunned horror in their wake. The fallout for Monroe was swift and brutal. By the end of the day he was fired, not just from the Vestra account, but from the agency entirely. Security escorted him from the building, carrying his belongings in a sad little cardboard box. I heard from a gossiping coworker in the kitchen that his corporate credit cards had been frozen midday by the agency's own finance department. Apparently, in the wake of the Vestra disaster, the CEO had ordered an immediate audit of Monroe's expenses, discovering he had been billing the company for lavish client dinners that were in fact personal vacations. His professional life had been a house of cards, and I had just pulled out the bottom one. The agency itself began to hemorrhage clients. News of the disastrous Vestra meeting and Monroe's spectacular flameout traveled quickly through the tight-knit business community. No one wanted to be associated with a firm that was publicly exposed as fraudulent. The company that had once seemed so powerful and monolithic was suddenly fragile, teetering on the brink of collapse. During that chaotic week, I quietly and systematically poached their top talent. I reached out to the two most brilliant developers and the sharpest graphic designer, people I knew were underpaid and underappreciated, just as I had been. I offered them competitive salaries, significant equity in Brightnest, and something the old agency could never offer, a culture of respect and genuine collaboration. They all accepted without hesitation. A week later, I received an email from the agency's CEO, a man who had never spoken more than a handful of words to me in all my years there. The tone of the email was crawling with a desperate, false sincerity. He was deeply sorry for the oversight regarding my contributions. He praised my innovative spirit and offered me a new position, creative director of the entire agency, with a significant raise. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to reclaim the talent and intellectual property he had so carelessly allowed to walk out the door. I took a deep, satisfying breath and typed my reply. It was short, to the point, and deeply gratifying. No thanks. I own my name now. I hit send, and for the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly free. A month later, an invitation arrived in my inbox that felt like the final, validating chapter of a long and arduous journey. I was invited to be a panelist at Tech Innovate 2025, a major industry conference. The panel topic was Disrupting the Market: How Small Startups Can Outmaneuver Industry Giants. It was an opportunity not just to promote Brightnest, but to tell my story on my own terms in a public forum, surrounded by my peers. The night of the event, I felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but it was different from the fear and anxiety of the past. This was the nervous energy of anticipation, of stepping into a spotlight I had earned. As I walked onto the brightly lit stage, I scanned the audience. The room was packed with hundreds of faces: investors, founders, developers, journalists. And then I saw them, sitting together in the third row, looking uncomfortable and out of place, were several of my old coworkers from the agency. Sarah from marketing, Mark the lead designer, and a few others. And sitting right next to them, looking gaunt and defeated, was Monroe. His face was pale, his expensive suit looked rumpled, and the arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted expression. Seeing him there, a spectator to my success, sent a jolt of ice-cold vindication through me. I took my seat at the panel table. The moderator introduced me, and when it was my turn to speak, I stood up and walked to the podium. I didn't need notes. I knew this story by heart. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone. A little over a year ago, I was told that I wasn't paid to think big. I was told that my job was to handle the back-end stuff, to be the technical wizardry behind the scenes while someone else took the credit. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the room, briefly locking gaze with Monroe. I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. I was called a back-end rat once, a nobody. I was the person you could steal from without consequence, because you assumed I didn't have the power or the voice to fight back. A murmur went through the audience. This wasn't the typical sanitized startup story. This was real. But they were wrong, I continued, my voice gaining strength. They underestimated the power of being invisible. While they were busy taking credit, I was busy building. While they were focused on presentations, I was focused on product. I built a company in secret, on nights and weekends, fueled by cheap coffee and a refusal to accept the story they had written for me. Today, that company, Brightnest, serves over 400 clients worldwide, including two of the esteemed venture capital firms represented in this very room. There was a burst of spontaneous applause. I saw Anton Dresden, sitting in the front row, give me a slow, appreciative nod. "I'm here to tell you that your title does not define your vision, your boss does not own your ideas, and you should never ever let someone else's story of you become your own." I looked directly at Monroe one last time, my gaze unflinching. I didn't win by getting angry. I won by getting to work. I didn't let the story end at humiliation. I wrote a new ending. The applause was deafening. As I walked back to my seat, I saw Monroe's face. It was ashen. He looked like he had seen a ghost. The ghost of the woman he thought he had erased. I no longer live in a cramped apartment with a view of a brick wall. Now my mornings start with the sound of birdsong and the sight of sunlight dappling across the surface of a calm blue lake. I bought a small cottage, a quiet sanctuary nestled in a grove of pine trees about an hour outside the city. It's my refuge, the place where I can breathe, think, and continue to build. The air here is clean, and the silence is a healing balm. My life has changed in almost every conceivable way, but the core of who I am, the builder, the problem solver, remains the same. I still run Brightnest, but I no longer do it alone from my kitchen table. We have a small, sleek office downtown, but our work culture is flexible. Most of our team works remotely, a testament to the very communication principles our platform espouses. I've hired a dedicated team of brilliant, passionate people, developers, designers, and customer support specialists who believe in our mission. I make it a point to know each of them by name, to listen to their ideas, and to ensure that credit is always given where it is due. We have created the kind of company I always dreamed of working for. My allies, the ones who stood by me when I had nothing, have been rewarded for their faith. Mr. Rollins is happily retired. One of the first things I did when Brightness became truly profitable was to pay off the remaining balance of his mortgage. I'll never forget the tears in his eyes when I told him. He sends me postcards from his fishing trips, simple, heartfelt notes that I treasure more than any business award. He was the first person who saw me, and I will never forget it. Xander, the brilliant freelance designer who gave my vision a face, is now our full-time head of UX. He has equity in the company and the creative freedom to push the boundaries of our product. His nervous energy has been channeled into a focused passion, and he has become one of the most respected design leads in the industry. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I think back to that birthday, my 28th birthday. I can still feel the weight of that pink cupcake box in my hands, the sting of exclusion, the crushing humiliation of being unseen and uninvited. I remember sitting on the cold bathroom floor, my world feeling like it had shrunk to the size of that single lonely stall. For a long time, that memory was a source of pain, a scar that I thought would never fade. But now I smile when I think of it. I smile because that day, which felt like an ending, was actually the beginning of everything. The cupcakes I brought in, a naive offering of warmth, became a symbol of my misplaced hope in a system designed to exploit me. The party I wasn't invited to became the catalyst that forced me to build my own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. Every condescending remark from Monroe, every dismissive laugh from my coworker, every moment of being underestimated and overlooked, they thought those were weapons they were using against me. They didn't realize they were giving me fuel. Everything they used to mock me for, my quiet nature, my intense focus on the back-end stuff, my tendency to work in the background, became the very foundation of my victory. I won because I was quiet. I won because I understood the details. I won because while they were busy seeking the spotlight, I was busy building the entire stage. Sometimes the best revenge is building in silence and letting your results speak louder than their insults. Have you ever been underestimated by someone in power, only to prove them wrong later? Let me know in the comments. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more true-to-life stories of resilience and quiet triumph. Thanks for watching. You're stronger than they think. Keep building.